There's two different contexts in which we get measured to see whether or not we're successful. One arena is games, which we obviously typically enjoy. And then the other arena is something like a business context at work where you get measured about, have you hit your numbers? Are you doing the things you're supposed to be doing? And there are various metrics to track how well you're doing. Do well on the metrics, that equals success, that equals all else equal, promotions, raises, blah, blah, blah. But in the case of games, we usually find measurement, how well we're doing, a score. We find that really enjoyable, or we want to do better in the score, and we find ourselves engaged by the game. We find engaging in the game meaningful even. On the other hand, getting measured at work does not feel quite as joyous, doesn't feel quite as meaningful. In fact, it could be pretty dreadful. I always resented when anyone assessed me at work, which perhaps is why I have my own business. Today, my guest is Thi Nguyen from the University of Utah, where he's a philosophy professor. He recently came out with a book called The Score: How to Stop Playing Somebody Else's Game. You can find the link to that book on the show description. His answer as to why do we find scoring in one arena interesting, rich, and meaningful, and the other one not, is something like the following. When it comes to scoring in games, the scores that are created, at least in a game that's well scored, it does so in a way that supports us having rich experiences while engaging in the game. It's built around us finding intrinsic enjoyment, reward, meaningfulness in the activity that we're engaged in. On the other hand, if you score us for something that is external to anything having to do with our experience, or whether we find it meaningful or not, but rather we're scored in a way that tracks how well we're doing at pursuing external institutional goals, we find it not only not meaningful, but in some cases we can find it alienating. We talk about a lot of other things having to do with how metrics shape our activity. Actually, some of the conversation reminds me of a conversation that I had with a friend back when I was in grad school. We were both getting PhDs in philosophy, and he said his real love is literature, not philosophy. And I was totally perplexed. I said, why? You're getting a PhD in philosophy. Surely philosophy is the thing that you're passionate about. And he said, no. And I said, well, why not get a PhD in literature? And he said, because it's going to ruin it. If I get a PhD in literature, it's going to turn literature into my career, into a job, into obligation, but I want it to remain pure. So a lot of the conversation that we have, to me, brings to mind that conversation because T talks about how metrics shape our activities, even the ones that we love to engage in, and can begin to eat away at them. And he also talks about how once those metrics become the measure of success, they start to replace our real values with simplified, countable ones. This is what he calls value capture. So super fascinating conversation. His stuff is always so interesting and coming at things from a different angle. So as always, love talking to him. Go get his book. If you want to complain about anything, tell me I'm no good, make a recommendation, you can email me at em@readblackman.com. I'm coming out with a new book in April called The Ethical Nightmare Challenge, How to Avoid the Worst of AI. And if you want to stay informed about that, you can go to readblackman.substack.com, sign up there. I don't send you a bunch of promotional stuff. It's only if I have actually something substantive to say, including about news about the book, excerpts from the book, etc. Okay, let's go talk to T. T, you wrote this book called The Score, just came out, and it ends, or the point is almost inscrutable, the main point that you're making, which is something like there's games on the one hand and there's bureaucracy on the other, and your claim is we've got more fine-grained control over games than we do bureaucracies, which might be a really interesting conclusion, but of course the question is like why even think to compare games and bureaucracy in the first place? What's the connective tissue between these things such that we come to this big conclusion?
Yeah, I can give you the long, drawn-out personal story, but maybe I should just tell you the heart of the matter.
Is there a short personal version?
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of them. But the heart of the matter is this question that I got really obsessed with, which is about scoring systems, which is why it seemed to me that sometimes we do this thing, we play games, and then the games score us. They give us really clear reports of how well we do.
Sure.
And in games, in sports, in climbing for me, in board games, this is the center of so much delight, so much fun, so much flexibility. They're like the light of my life. And then we turn around and there's another part of our life where we're exposed to another set of clear scoring systems. institutional metrics, citation ratings, evaluations, Yelp stars, page views, likes, retweets. And here, these seem to drain the life out of everything. So the question is why?
So one, we get measured all over the place, games and in our especially our professional lives. Yeah. But if I have you right, they do opposite things. The scoring in games makes us really excited, and the scoring in professional life makes us want to kill ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And it's funny you use the word excitement, because I think a part of the core for me is that in both cases they seize our motivations. One of the most interesting things, both just watching games and looking at all the sociology and psychology of metrics, all of them say that they just sneak into our values. They can change our values. They can change our desires. They can super reorient us.
Yeah.
And in games, this seems to be used to explore different landscapes. And in metrics, it's used to drag us into horrible grinding activity. So this book is like a quest to understand what the difference is.
Yeah.
And it's one that takes me through game design and the beauty of game design and the degree to which like various sports and games have saved my life. And then it takes me through understanding exactly what bureaucracy is, understanding exactly what bureaucratic metrics are, and exactly how they work, the way that they extract certain kinds of information.
Yeah.
And you need to understand really carefully both how games and because there's a way in which both of them are quite similar. Both of them are clear rules to coordinate us, and they're clear rules. The center of a lot of them is clear rules about what counts as success, right? What gets you the score. And it's actually, once you talk yourself into that point, it's really puzzling why. And a lot of people think that if you just add scoring into education, if you just add scoring into work, if you just gamify everything, you motivate people and bring the fun of games into real life. And the opposite happens. People mostly experience gamifications as horrible intrusions in their motivation.
I want to know if I understand your sort of question in the right kind of way. What would count as an answer to the question? Are you asking and answering an empirical question, like a question about human psychology and motivation? So we need to do sort of investigation into what explains why people react differently to metrics in different contexts? Right. Or is there some other kind of philosophical and or normative question answer being offered as well?
It's going to be a big, messy mixture. Because a lot of what we have are a lot of empirical facts that are very well recorded.
Yeah.
The facts that people can immediately... The fact that in the game space, the thing I find really interesting is the fact that people can just change their desires in a second. Open up a rule book. Look at the scoring system. Be like, okay, we're going to kill each other. Or, okay, we're going to cooperate. Or, okay, we're in a team. There's this basic core psychological fact about gameplay that's well observed in all of anthropology and sociology. It's an empirical fact that we change easily. And then there's this incredibly well recorded fact in the sociology of bureaucracies and institutions that when you put a metric in front of people in any institution, they all like orient on it like schooling fish. It just becomes central to their focus and attention. And the thing that's similar between both, empirical fact, is that human beings find it really easy to use a well laid out scoring system to focus their attentions and cares. And we also know, basic empirical fact, that people love playing games, that find it very fulfilling. And it is the sociologist Wendy Esplund and the sociologist Michael Sauter in the book Engines of Anxiety, which is a study of what happened to law school culture when the U.S. News and World Report started ranking law schools. Their report is that everyone in the system felt consciously anxious, constantly miserable, and forced to do terrible things to their institutions that they didn't care about at all. Yeah. So these are all empirical facts on the ground. What there isn't is a good explanation of why one of these is so harmful and one of these is not. And I think this is what I want to do. This is the philosopher coming in, trying to tell you about why one of these is why games and play are central to a meaningful life, and why metrics are probably going to rip a meaningful life out of your hands.
Okay, I want to start espousing hypotheses, but I'll refrain. So what's the explanation?
No, put your hypothesis on the ground. Put it down.
Okay, so this is obviously off the cuff. I haven't given this nearly as much thought as you have. I would guess something like the metrics in games are the conditions under which we engage in intrinsically enjoyable activity. It creates the context or situation or foundation in which we can do stuff that we find intrinsically, whatever, fun, enjoyable, blah, blah, blah. So there's nothing intrinsically great about hitting I don't know. I don't want to use baseball because I don't even like baseball, but climbing. I don't know. Okay. I'm gonna start there, and then with metrics in the bureaucracy or institutional life, or work or whatever, it's not setting the foundations up for a certain kind of activity that we find intrinsically enjoyable. It's because it makes meeting the metrics the very thing that constitutes success, whereas metrics in the game situation is not the success. The success is the activity that going for the score engenders.
Beautiful, man. Okay, I think
right,
basically that is absolutely right, and I can take you a long route to give you all the details, but that is it. Okay. In some sense, they're designed for different. Nailed it. Done. So the quick version of the answer is that games are designed. There are two main features to the answer. It's that games are designed for rich enjoyment, pleasure, satisfaction, intrinsic value, and in particular, that they're highly tailorable because of the nature of games to your own peculiar personality, where metrics are not designed for that. They're designed for a kind of large-scale information extraction, and we can get very clear on how they're designed for that. And in order to play their role in the information extraction and aggregation in large-scale institutions, they're not tailorable. You can't. If you want the endpoint in one sentence, it's going to be something like, you can house rule Dungeons and Dragons, but you can't house rule GPA, and you can't house rule page views. But I can take a...
Yeah, I want to hear more about the tailoring bit, because I don't understand that immediately, because there are rules to the game. Any game you play, there are rules that you walk into, right? In climbing, there's the rankings of, let's say, V0 to V, whatever they're doing now, 15, 16, I don't know, banana stuff. And you walk into that world of ranking in baseball or football or wrestling or whatever. You walk into the rules of the game. They're not tailored to you. Maybe you choose that because something about the rules speaks to you, or something about the activity that the rules engender speaks to you. But yeah, anyway, say more about the tailoring.
Right. So let's dive into game design, because there are two big chunks we need to lay on the table to make this make sense.
Sure.
Which is a theory of games and a theory of bureaucracy. So let's talk about games. The long answer to your question is going to be, games are this really funny thing, because you're exactly right. There's a way in which they're solid, they're pre-written, and you walk in and you experience rules, and they drag you into a new kind of activity. And there's a way in which you have a high degree of control over the rules, because you get to choose your games. And one of the core background features is there are hundreds of thousands of games to choose from. If you're a student, there's GPA, and that's it, and you have no choice. Okay, let me back up. So there are a lot of features of games that are super interesting for the contrast. I've been working on the philosophy of games for 9 years of my life. By the way, this is a very strange thing to do as a philosopher. This is not a normal.
I mean, being a philosopher is a strange thing to do as well. It's fine.
It's weird. It's exponentially weird.
Yeah, right.
The philosophers look at me like I'm a crazy person.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yep. I need some cream of the crop equivalent that's for weirdness. It's the weird of the. It's like the weird crust of the weird swamp. Okay. There are two kind of major ideas that really helped me understand what games were. I started reading about games. I was doing some work on games. I was trying to figure out what they are. I was reading all this stuff. They were saying, games are art because they're interactive fiction. They're like movies and you get choices. And I was like, no, because there's so much more. There's so much more about skill and choice. And there are two theories that really helped me understand the nature of games. One is Bernard Suits, who's a philosopher. And he offers a definition of games. And his definition is playing a game is voluntarily taking on unnecessary obstacles to make possible an activity. So the obstacles create the activity. So one quick way to put it is, in every game he thinks there's a goal you're trying to hit, and there's an easy way to do it. If you're running a marathon and you're trying to get to the finish line, you could call a taxi. Yeah. Right? You could walk. Sure. You could call a taxi.
Sure.
You could take a shortcut, right? If you're a rock climber like me, right, you could also walk up the back or use a grappling hook or use a helicopter, right? There's an easy way, but you avoid it. So what that means is that if you're avoiding the easy way, it must be that the outcome, the goal by itself, is not what's valuable. What's valuable is in the doing. So exactly. This is a route to intrinsic value. The other major data point for me is Rainer Knizia, who's my favorite board game designer. He's a German genius of board game design. And he has this interview at a game developers conference where he says, the most important thing in my game designer's toolbox is the scoring system, because the scoring system tells people what to care about. It sets their motivation in the game. When you put these two together, what you get is this view that what games do is they offer you this alternate self, and at the center of that alternate self is a different set of desires. And And when you play a game, you take on those desires. To really understand this, I think one of the core ideas in the book and in all the work I've done on the philosophy of games is introducing this distinction between two motivations for which you could play a game. So one is achievement play. That's just playing because you care about winning, and winning really matters to you. The other kind of game playing is striving play. So striving play is when you take on the desire to win in order to have the struggle. So in achievement play, winning is the point. In striving play, the struggle is the point. One way to put it is, I think, so achievement play. So if you're an Olympic athlete that wants to be the best, or you want to win nobility for your country, or if you're a poker player, right? What you actually care about is winning. Striving players are people for whom winning is galactically unimportant, but they need to try to win in order to have fun. So here's an argument. By the way, when I put this idea down, some people are like, "Oh, of course," and other people are like, "That is nuts. There's no such thing."
No, that's
so here's an argument.
Yeah, go ahead.
So here's an argument that striving play exists. Consider the category of stupid games. A stupid game is a game where the fun part is failing, but in order to have fun, you have to actually try to win.
Okay, yeah, I like
so
that.
like Twister.
Yeah.
So
I was just literally playing it 2 days ago. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
If you fall on purpose, it's not funny.
Yeah.
So to play Twister, you have to galactically want the joy of failure, but to actually have it be failure in the game, you have to make yourself actually try not to fail.
Okay.
So what this exposes to me is that what games really expose is the value of is the degree to which activities are intrinsically valuable. What they expose is Aristotle's original insight that
happiness is in the doing.
Yeah, the meaning of life is in action itself, and games are sculpted action.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm also a climber. So yeah, getting to the top, who cares? It's not about being at the top. It's about the trying.
It's not trying unless you're trying to get to the top. That is the weird paradox.
For sure.
The weird paradox of climbing is all the intensity and thrill comes from trying really hard to get to the top. And the moment you get to the top, you lower off. That's the paradox of games.
You lower off. What do you mean by that?
So if you're sport climbing,
yeah,
you climb to the top, and then the moment you touch the cliffs at the top, you're like, okay, lower me.
Yeah.
You don't care about being. You have to.
You're not up there for the view.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yes.
Who gives a crap? But here's the really important part for me. So striving play is in between kind of two positions. One position I think is I just want to win. What I care about is winning an achievement.
Yeah.
The other version is the other pole is we can just play. We can just do whatever. We don't need rules. We don't need structure. We can just have fun.
Let's just volley the ball.
Yeah, but I think what's interesting about games is in so many games, you need the rules and structure. And in particular, you need the very highly specified goal. And you need to be able to try really hard for that goal in order to have this very specific kind of activity. Yeah. So I fly fish. And fly fishing is a very weird activity because you have a very specific... If in dry fly fishing, there's only one thing that really counts as a victory, which is landing a floating fly delicately on the surface of the water in front of a feeding fish that you can see and having that feeding fish take the fly.
Okay.
Once you take that as a goal, you have to do all this weird stuff. You have to be hyper absorbed in watching the current, looking for trout, looking at bugs, trying. But if you didn't have that goal, if you were just like fishing with some other goal, like catching fish with a net, you wouldn't get dragged into that activity.
Yeah.
So this is related to this is exactly related to what you said before at the top of this. It is when we walk into games, they are pre-structured. One of the interesting things about games is it's not just that you randomly wander in and just do whatever.
Sure, yeah.
It's that someone gives you a very specific structure, and that teaches you there is no way on my own without the culture, community, and rules of fly fishing that I would have found my way into this weird ass activity. So it is a pre-existing structure, but it's also one that you are free to move between different games and modify games. I can change the game of fly fishing for myself. I think Mario is a super interesting example. Some people choose getting to the end of the game as a goal. Some people choose getting it there faster. Some people choose collecting everything for maximum points. Each of those is a different experience with different feel. And with games, you get to choose.
Let me say one other thing about what might be interesting about games, and tell me if this sort of fits into how you think about them. I think that one thing that's fun about them and maybe this, I don't know, it's something like there's something intrinsically enjoyable about engaging in activity that's at the limit of your capacities.
Yeah.
Something along, if it's too easy, it's not fun. Even if it were climbing and you're climbing like a 5'5", 5'6", or something really easy, it's like a ladder. It's not interesting. If it's a 5, whatever, if it's extremely difficult and you can't even touch the thing, you can't even hold on to anything, it's no good. But there's something about exercising your capacities at their limits or near their limits. That's where the enjoyment comes from. Something along those lines.
I think one of the interesting things about games, so I have two answers for you. One is exactly right. And one of the interesting things about games is if the thing that's delicious is this experience of just being at your limit, games offer you something the world does not, which is the ability to micro-scale the challenges to put you at your limit, right? The world normally doesn't let you carefully choose exactly the challenge.
And safely.
At your delicious limit. Right. And safe. Games don't always have to be safe. But
I guess that's right. True. Yes.
But you can, but whatever your ability, you can change the difficulty setting. You can pick the difficulty of the climb. You can change your opponents. You can change the game until it pushes your abilities to the level you want. It's the first thought. The second thought is not only do you have that choice of scaling the challenge to you, you also have the choice of the degree of challenge you want. I think I love being at my limit. Other people don't.
Yeah.
And I freely, like some days I've learned, some days I want to be my absolute limit in climbing, and other days I can be like, oh, this isn't giving me any pleasure. I'm just going to climb medium climbs as elegantly as I can and hit this flow state. This is the contrast we're building. Games are highly structured scoring systems and rule sets that create activity, but they're also ones that admit of high changeability, high modifiability, and high on-the-fly alteration of not just the constraints, but even your conception of what you're trying to do. One time I was just suffering rock climbing.
Yeah. And
I was trying to climb something hard, and my friend was like, just try to climb something easy beautifully. And that was a different goal, and I was like, oh, this is what I want to do today. Awesome.
Yeah.
Because I had the ability to shift the goal mid-activity.
So let's pivot a little bit. Why doesn't gamification work of the other stuff? Right? Okay, I've got to do some activity for my job or whatever it is, and I don't really want to do it. Right. And then we make it a game somehow, where I get pitted against either my previous self, how I performed last month, or maybe against other departments, whatever. Why doesn't it become, in addition to the thing that I have to do, why aren't the numbers there also create conditions under which I can find the activity intrinsically enjoyable?
I will give you a very short answer, and then there's a much longer, more interesting answer. The short answer is that gamifications are normally tied to external considerations. So if I want to gamify, if I've got a bunch of employees and I want to gamify them to make them more productive, then I have to tie the point system to something that counts as productivity. The employees cannot re-alter the scoring system to suit. That's number one. Number two is game scoring systems, because they're not tied to anything in the world, can be freely shifted plastically to yield the most satisfying activity. Large-scale metrics aren't free in that way, because the things that... You can play games in a classroom. You can play games in the workplace and be free to specify your scoring system.
Sure.
But what gamification is attaching game-like structures to pre-existing value systems, and where those pre-existing value systems are normally tied to large-scale institutions and economies. So that's the short answer. I can give the bigger answer if you.
I just want to make sure that I understand.
I just want to freak out about the short answer.
I just want to understand that. I'm not sure that I understand the explanation yet. So. Yeah. I don't totally understand the point about it's plastic in the world of games. It's not plastic in the world of whatever, large companies or something like that. Because of the point we said earlier, I walk into the baseball game, I walk into the climbing crag, I walk blah, 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 blah. And so I don't choose those rules. Similarly, In some broad sense, maybe it's not broad enough. I choose the job that I work at or the industry that I work in or whatever. At least there's lots of cases in which I do choose the industry. There's lots of cases in which you don't, of course, but take the cases in which you do. Yeah, I want to be in pharma. I want to be in healthcare. I want to be in whatever. So you do choose that. So now you're choosing some, broadly speaking, some rules to walk into. The fact that I can't change them is similar to the fact that I can't change the rules of baseball once I enter the baseball field. Okay, so keep going. So now I don't know, where do I go from here?
One answer, there's not a clear games versus institutions division. It's a very complex spectrum. If you are a high school athlete and the only game in town is football, this is more like exposure to a fixed, rigid system. And I think some of us do have the privilege of getting to choose a job that has a scoring system and activity that satisfies us. And I think a lot of us who have the freedom to choose a job are making something like a game-like choice, right? I think I chose philosophy because the kind of activity and the goal of publishing papers is really satisfying to me. And I think one of the endpoints of this is they're not totally different. And if they were totally different, I couldn't give you the big finale, which is you should try to treat your work life more like a true game, which is one where you choose the rules and the scoring system that suits you. But I think a lot of people don't do that. I think the institutional context I think about my students all the time. They don't have a choice about their scoring system. GPA is the scoring system. And then once you've gotten that and you're in a job, you don't have a lot of freedom. But I think the real thing that I think happens is that there's a sense in which games have a certain degree of freedom just because they're disconnected. Here's one thing that happens. Okay, here's the simplest contrast, and then I think I need to give you this chunk of stuff about bureaucracies. So here's one version of the difference. Okay, let's say I'm playing Mario Odyssey. I suck at Mario Odyssey. I'm terrible at platformers, and I put it on the easiest mode and just try to do the minimal to get through. And my friend is super good. He tries to speed run it while hitting everything elegantly, and we get points, but we've added we've changed the constraints, we've changed our conception of what we're doing, and we need to figure out how do his speedrunning points compare to my I'm just trying to do this slowly and chilly and enjoy myself. And the answer is we actually don't need to cross-compare those points. So I have a freedom to reinterpret what I'm doing because we don't have that demand for cross-comparison. Now think about what's going on with GPA, right? If a student doesn't like the degree to which the form in which GPA is intruding into their life, they can't really reinterpret it. Okay, you're giving me I need to back up. I need to give you a chunk of context here. None of this will make sense until we do the other half of the slab,
which is something like the theory of bureaucracy, as opposed to the theory of gaming. Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, so if you think about what scoring systems are, here's a theory of scoring systems. So what a scoring system is something that makes explicit how you're going to evaluate things so that we all will evaluate them in a similar way.
Okay.
So here's something that it took me a while to understand. You can have games and competition without a scoring system. So if we all are skateboarders and we're going to the skate park and we're all going to try to do the coolest trick, we don't need to establish a scoring system. And in fact, each of us can come away with a different set of judgments about who did the coolest trick. Or even if that was, actually, no, there's not one. There were 3 very differently beautiful tricks that are different in different ways. That's fine. Nothing forces me to come to one judgment or forces us to come to one judgment.
Sure.
A scoring system is something that we buy into that guarantees that we will all settle on the same official judgment. Okay. So how does that work out in institutions? So in institutions, scoring systems, metrics get tied to data. And this is the big, crucial, central question now. What is data? What is institutional data? To understand what's distinctive about metrics and why they're weird to take on its values, you have to understand, so not everything is capturable as data. You can get a hint of this in games. So we don't even have to think about institutions, think about the slide. Again, it's not a clear, cut and dried distinction. So the history of skateboarding is super interesting because for a long time, skateboarding was dominated by an attempt at doing something very stylistically rich. Cool lines, flowing lines, beautiful lines. And then everything changed when skateboarding became an Olympic sport and entered the ESPNX, because then you needed to have a clear way to settle a winner. You needed a scoring system. And skateboarding changed its aboutness. Like the ESPN X Games, people are measured on height and number of flips. And so I think one quick and crucial way to put it is that skateboarding in a kind of natural, pre-institutionalized version can focus on weird, subtle beauties. But when you have to institutionalize a method of counting together, suddenly that changes the target to something that's easy to measure and easy to agree upon in an institutional context. So I think you can get a feel for this, but I was really helped to understand this stuff by a bunch of people who do work in a field called science and technology studies. And there's a little subfield there about people that study quantification culture and politics and bureaucracy. There's a book from Theodore Porter called Trust in Numbers, where he gives this really lovely theory of what bureaucratic numbers are. He says that there are basically two ways of knowing things, qualitative and quantitative, and they're each good at different things. And one of the problems he's worried about is when people compulsively reach for the quantitative in every case, no matter how appropriate it is. So here's his account. Qualitative information is rich and open-ended and nuanced. It's dynamic. You can change what you're talking about. You can evaluate it in subtle ways. You can evaluate it in multiple dimensions. But it travels badly between contexts because it requires a high amount of shared background knowledge to understand. Quantitative knowledge in institution works like this. We pre-specify some kind of context-invariant kernel, and we stabilize the meaning. And in order to make it cross-context, we remove all the parts of it that require a lot of high-context nuance and experience to understand. And once we have that nugget, it can cross-context. So an easy example for me as a teacher is qualitative information is like long, qualitative feedback I give my students on their essays about originality and thoughtfulness and all that stuff. And quantitative is letter grades, which is a simple, stripped-down thing where the meaning is approximately fixed across a huge amount of society. And so everyone can collect into it, everyone can roughly agree on the meaning, and we can aggregate easily. So one of the core insights from Porter is that the reason that institutional numbers are powerful is precisely because they've been engineered to be decontextualized, because that's what makes them usable across a large-scale institution of many people of many different backgrounds. So here's one, there's a bunch more to say, but one fast way of putting it is that institutional metrics are tied to institutional data under this constraint, this like decontextualization constraint. And so that means that any kind of target that you're going to try to track in an institution via a metric is constrained by this imperative of decontextualization. You can't target things that only some people in the institution who have a lot of richness and subtlety and sensitivity can see. You can only target the kinds of things that everyone can see. So there's this hyper strong accessibility constraint. Does that make sense?
I think so. I'm trying to also simultaneously think about what the upshot is. So is the upshot something like, okay, so look, especially in large institutions, they like quantitative metrics. They want to measure things. And they don't want to do, so that's the nature of their evaluation, is primarily, if not solely, quantitative. And there's various reasons for that. It's useful in a variety of ways, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I get that. And then if I try to relate this to games and joy, and you should try to, intrinsic enjoyment, and you should try to make work into a game or something along those lines, is the idea something like, maybe it's not the fact that your work is scored, but it's the way in which it's scored. It's scored in a kind of coarse-grained way that is not interested in how you feel about things. Because probably, this is just me, maybe, I don't know if I'm reading into this or just saying my own thing now, because those metrics, I take it, in, say, work, typically are measuring specifically your output. So you win when you produce a certain output, without regard to how much you enjoy the activity. Whereas that doesn't seem to be the case with scoring in games. Yes, it measures or it's paying attention to the outcome or the output or whatever, but it doesn't, something like it doesn't assume that success just is, or it plausibly the rules of the game are partly informed by the kinds of activities that people enjoy doing, right? If you create the rules of a game where there's an outcome to be won, but everyone hates playing that game, that's a pretty shitty game. But if everyone hates playing the game in the manufacturing facility, don't care. That doesn't mean that we're not going to play the game. Those are the games because we want the output. And so is it something like that? It's that the scoring system in a bureaucracy or in a workplace or something like that, that scoring and those were rules. I don't know why I can't say the word all of a sudden. Those were created in a context that was apathetic to intrinsic enjoyment, and that's not the case with games.
Yeah, there's two levels of explanation. So the first explanation is that some games can target subtle, weird, rich things.
Yeah.
That aren't mechanistic. So with skateboarding,
like style,
you can just target beautiful style.
Yeah.
I play tabletop role-playing games. Some of the games I play just give people points for telling a good story.
Okay.
Like, you get experience points if you did a cool dramatic thing. So you can just directly target these rich, subtle things if you're not tied to the institutional setting.
Yeah.
That's level one. But two, we know a lot of games do target mechanistic, very simple targets, right? Get the ball in the net.
Sure.
Right. Get to the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
In that case, we get the second stage, which is what's really crucial is that exactly what you said. That games are designed, we can push around the scoring system. Because the scoring system in games is disattached to external world outcomes, then we can push it and change it. We can push it and change it to the point to optimize for our richness of experience. Mm-hmm. And then the players can shift between different systems to find the one they want. Yeah. And what's really key here is the kind of plasticity of scoring in games. I teach game designers sometimes, and when you're playing something, you can just be like, oh, what if you didn't score? What if instead of scoring people's writing quality, you're making some kind of drawing game. What if you, instead of scoring their picture quality, you scored their speed? Or what if you scored how many people could guess it? Yeah. Or what if you scored how many people knew you were faking it? Because that score is disattached to anything that matters to the world, you can just shove it around until the game is utterly delightful.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
With institutional metrics, you don't, the thing that it points at has to be mechanistically clear. And then B, you don't have the capacity to do this quick and easy shoving around. One way to put it is that single human designers playing a game can step back and be like, the scoring system isn't working for you, it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Institutions, insofar as the way they value has to be expressed in metrics, insofar as that's how the justification works in an institution, don't have that standpoint to back off and say, the scoring system isn't working. All they have is the scoring system. So this isn't, I'm not saying this is absolutely, so if you are the CEO of your company and you have total control over all the metrics, and you can shove them around in any way you want to create employee satisfaction, you can be like a game designer. But that's not how large-scale institutions typically work.
No. Yeah, that's a good point to make to the blind referee who's reviewing your paper, because they're going to bring up something pedantic like that. What about the CEO? Okay, shut up.
No, but this is actually really important, because I'm not saying that every company and every bureaucracy is inevitably going to be terrible. In fact, one of the outcomes of this is if you have control, and sometimes I'm talking to, if I get to talk to a university administrator, what I'm going to try to say is you do have control of your metrics. You can think about it like a game designer. But the problem is that isn't typically how bureaucracies work, because bureaucracies, insofar as their internal method of thinking, insofar as the metrics are how they evaluate things, insofar as that's how they figure out what's important, then that's, the buck stops there. Like there's no further standpoint to modify the scoring system. And they're limited.
So let me ask you two, I think, related questions. One is, I'm going to put your thing slightly differently, and you tell me if it's a misrepresentation somehow. Suppose I put on like a Kantian hat and I say, it seems like what you're saying is that metrics in a bureaucracy are created in a way that treats the people that they're measuring as a mere means to an end, the outcome, the output, whatever. Whereas metrics designed in a game setting are treated with respect for the person and sense of what they would find delightful, as you said. So is it a matter of something like, how the evaluation, as it were, treats the person that's being evaluated as a mere tool to bring about some output, some outcome, versus as a being who intrinsically enjoys some activities, not others, blah, blah, blah. You're shaking your head no. So good.
Yeah, no, that's too optimistic. Okay.
Okay, good, yeah.
Okay. So if that were true, then good-hearted, large-scale bureaucracies that loved people wouldn't be in this problem. I don't think that's true. My worry is that so some of the key studies that I was really interested in here. So Sally Engel-Mary has this incredible book called Seductions of Quantification. And it was looking at the UN attempt to quantify growth, development, and human rights, and in particular to quantify well-being. So if you think, let's assume for the second, it's pretty plausible. The UN, the people doing this is a good-hearted institution that wants people to be better. It's trying to maximize well-being. The problem is that well-being for this institution is going to be constrained by what can be counted in this decontextualizing way.
Yeah.
So one of my worries is this is a problem for you, whatever, your greedy, whatever, corporate overlords.
Sure.
I think the really pessimistic worry for me is that the best-hearted health policy and the best-hearted people interested in well-being can be caught by the same problem if they're going to be guided by... My worry is this is about a limitation on data in general, not... The problem here is not about selfishness or treating people as a means to an end, but it's just a problem of the data-based way of looking at the world, that there are certain kinds of things that data has trouble picking up on, which are highly contextual, highly variable things that require a high degree of sensitivity to judge, and that even the best-hearted person that treated people as an ends, that the kinds of ends that people can target... Okay, let me give you some easy examples. I was really... Okay, will this get me canceled? I was really worried during the COVID epidemic that public health strategies that saved people's lives that also had enormous costs in happiness, culture, community, that the arguments in favor of saving lives would always win. Yeah. That's the kind of thing that's easy to
measurement.
Count. Yeah, so there's a moment in my book, one of my you might like, this is, I think, too geeky for a lot of audiences, but you might be happy about this.
For sure.
I was writing about how when you're doing health policy about something like saturated fats, and you're weighing on the one hand the fact that saturated fats increase heart attack rates. On the other hand, you're weighing like the deliciousness of a good brie.
Yeah.
Right? The deliciousness of a good brie is really hard to quantify mechanically, and so it tends to lose the fight. And what people want to say is, but we can't, how do we weigh such ineffable things as the goodness of a good brie?
Yeah.
What I want to say is, what's more effable, what's more real than a good cheese? What people actually mean is the goodness of cheese is hard to abstract into something that's institutionally countable. And so one of my worries... It doesn't exist
on the same scale, something along those lines.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my worry is our sense of institutional accountability has seized our sense of reality, such that we somehow think that the deliciousness of cheese is not real because it's highly variable between people, because it's hard to... People's sense of... Many times people say something isn't real, but what they mean is there's not a mechanical procedure by which different people can count it reliably.
So one thing that sort of relates to this is that, like, I was looking at my LinkedIn feed or whatever, and someone said, it doesn't matter what the decision was about. He said, when it comes to such and such a decision, here's the algorithm that I use. And then they pointed out, one, if this, then no. And I thought, who thinks via algorithm? What a weird way to conceive of your own decision making. You should think of it as weighing various pros and cons, perhaps, or reasons for and against, and there's the weightiness of those reasons, but it's not mechanical like that. So
I get to tell you about my favorite thing in the world now.
Oh, great.
It might become your favorite thing in the world, too. So I was trying to understand exactly this. This is exactly right. One thing I want to say is I often have conversations like this where I'm like, this is good. And people are like, how do you know it's good? And I'm like, it's delicious. And they're like, but give me the mechanical procedure to determine for sure if it's delicious.
Yeah.
What I think is that this mindset is a bureaucratic mindset that's invaded many of our souls. But there's a really good story about what exactly it is and where it comes from. So I was really stuck on this point for a while. This field, there was something going on really important that I couldn't put my fingers on right in this space. And then I read Lorraine Daston's book, Rules, which is the best book. So Lorraine Daston is an intellectual historian.
Yeah.
Her earlier work is about how the concept of objectivity has varied over time. And this new book, Rules, is about how the concept of a rule has changed over time. And she thinks the old conception of a rule that was dominant for most of human history is a rule is what she calls a principle, which is a general statement that admits of many exceptions where you need judgment and discernment to know where the exceptions are.
It's like a guideline.
Right? So,
yeah.
Yeah. So typical example for me is like show, don't tell, right? Generally good principle. There's a reason behind it. You can break it all the time if you understand the principle.
Yeah.
But you can't give a mechanical list of what the exceptions are.
Yeah.
So she says there's this new thing. She calls it an algorithmic rule. I tend to call it a mechanical rule. She says that is designed to be followed unthinkingly and absolutely.
Yeah.
And then she says, and this is the part that blew my mind, she says, people think that these arose are on calculating machines. They actually arose 100 years earlier as an attempt to cheapen labor.
Yes.
By creating clear rules that anyone without expertise or training could follow. So I think the underlying feature, the kind of underlying logic of bureaucracies is actually worker fungibility. Like one of the core features of bureaucratic logic is you want to be able to hire and fire people at will and slot in someone new. And you don't need long sensitivity, long experience. What you just need is, does this person have a high school degree or do they have a BA? Then I can give them this rule book and they'll perform exactly the same.
Yeah.
So what algorithmicity here is, one way to put it is, the more mechanical something is, the more you can get any worker to be put in the same slot and get exactly the consistent result.
Yeah. It's so funny that you're saying all this because I literally read something like this maybe a month ago. I was reading a book called Team of Teams, and it talked about the history of business management. And I forgot the guy's name, like Murphy or Tyler or something like that, who created the science of management, which was exactly what you said, which went from artisans. And he said, no, I can make this more efficient if I create rules that everyone follows. No one exercises judgment. They just do this, then they do this, then they do that. And that's how we maximize efficiency and thereby maximize profits, et cetera. So hear you 100%. And it squeezes out the value of judgment, what we would probably call like practical judgment or something along those lines.
Actually, I forgot to introduce one of the key terms from the book. So the other key concept of striving play is value capture. So value capture is what happens when you have rich and subtle values or you're developing them and you get parked in a institution that feeds you simplified, typically quantified versions, and the simplified versions take over. And I think value capture isn't just incentives. It's you care about citations. You care about page views. So one way to put the problem of value capture is that you're internalizing the demand for mechanicity. You're internalizing, you're only letting yourself be ruled by values that have been designed to be usable by fungible workers, which means they cannot trigger off anything particular to you.
And this is why one reason why social media sucks so bad. Because people just do things that they think they're supposed to do to maximize whatever likes or reactions or comments without any sense of, sometimes I think, I'm not going to post that because it would be braggadocious and thereby undignified. And that's just not a thing, I think, that occurs to most people. They're bragging so much on social media. The only one that I really use is LinkedIn because of my business. But they're shameless. It's shame. And I'm just like, people have told me, oh, you should post more about this or that. So they know that you're, I'm like, no, that's undignified. I won't do it. But they just know you're trying to just make the error go up. It's like, no, I'm not. Yeah. That's a dumb way to live.
Yeah, this is just another case where, so one of the places I started thinking about this was thinking about how Twitter changed communicative patterns. Another place where you can think about the difference between what's easy to mechanically capture and what's important is just to think about Twitter registers a like, which is a simple binary.
Yeah.
It does not capture information about whether someone was moved. It does not capture deep transformation. It captures a simple binary in this first moment of exposure.
Yeah, it's like a grunt of approval.
Right. Exactly, the grunt of approval. And then it aggregates. It aggregates that because it's easy to capture and so easy to aggregate.
Yeah.
So that's a little vision of, I think, everything that metrics are doing to us.
Yeah.
Which is, insofar as you're motivated by them, you're putting at your center values that have to pass the test of mechanical, hyper-accessible, hyper-fungible usability.
Yeah.
Which means they cannot trigger off of anything delicate, sensitive, particular to you, born of your rich experience of the world. They just have to trigger off of things that everyone can instantly see.
Yeah. Let me ask you one final question then to wrap up. I want to say a little bit more about this sort of choosing like the work or choosing to turn work into a game or something. I know you're not saying something like you should choose what you're passionate about. This has become the sort of common trope. So for the audience and me, can you disentangle the difference between, hey, you should choose the kind of work that you're passionate about from your sort of thesis about choose the work that becomes a game or is a game or et cetera, et cetera. However.
There are two ways to put it. One way is there's a simple sense in which I'm saying that's what I'm saying in a complicated way. And what I'm saying is, in particular, don't let your passions be redefined by what's easy to count or easy to express. Listen, of course, choose what you're passionate about. And then a lot of people's passions translate into something, become captured and transformed into something that I'm passionate about journalism and connection. So now I care about page views or follows.
Yeah.
The worry for me in this case is a lot of the times, even that phrase gets captured because your passions themselves get retranslated by metrics. And the thing I'm really trying to push for is to listen for the voice of the thing that is hard to quantify, that is like the richer version of a passion.
Yeah.
So that's a simple thing.
Yeah.
The more complicated thing is I don't think choose your passion is great advice when you don't have control over the social structure.
Right.
In a sense, this is a game design issue, and we're not all game designers. A lot of us are forced to play a vast, horribly designed game that we have no control over. Yeah. Right? So I think a lot of work life for a lot of people is you can choose either shitty Monopoly or extra shitty Monopoly. Yeah, choose your passion. They're all crappy.
Yeah.
And we can explain reasons why they're crappy. Part of the sorrow of thinking about this for me is that there's not an easy answer. Choose your passion. A lot of the times, this is a story about why large-scale bureaucracies have systematically both gained power and ignore everything beautiful and weird and subtle. But then they have all the power. So it's not, choose your passion.
Yeah. Yes.
Crap. At the end of the book, there's this little argument. Maybe this will appeal to you. The argument is, I call it the value collapse argument. It just looks like this. So imagine that there's some simple metric about what matters. So in my space, in education, it's like graduation rate, right? Imagine there's some simple metric, and there are two populations. There's one population of people that know that's important, but also care about other things. Mm-hmm. And then there's another population that's fully value captured. They are all the way in for that metric.
Yeah.
They're going to be more efficient at hitting that metric.
Yeah.
And insofar as that metric is used to confer social power, insofar as people get promotions and power based on hitting the metric, then our institutions will systematically pick for people who are willing to sacrifice everything else that's important in favor of the simple metric.
Yeah.
And if such people tend to accumulate social power, they'll tend to make institutions that are more metrics oriented. And so there's this horrible feedback loop based on the fact that metrics are basically engineered easy justification and engineered easy communication.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to say choose your passion when
sure.
There's this story about how the power structures of the world inevitably tend to focus on and give us systems design that are oriented not towards our passions.
Yeah. That's a great optimistic note to end on, I think. I think nailed it. This conversation has been intrinsically enjoyable, and I don't care what the numbers of downloads are. It doesn't matter. But I hope it goes well. But thank you so much for doing it. This was super interesting. Great stuff. Everyone go read the score.
Okay. Thank you so much, man.
Bye-bye. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I want to thank a few people who make this all possible. Delano Alexander, he's my producer. He does such an amazing job on everything that he touches. Garrett Lang is the sound engineer. That's honestly, he's too good for me. Athmia Jairam has joined us recently. He's helping us find the best guests to bring onto this podcast. And Ashley Wasilenko helps us organize all this, get people on the schedule, get people's bios, headshots, and really keeps the train on the track. So thanks, guys. Really appreciate all the hard work you do.